Of course, Riverside was a tragic collapse of a roof. Immediately following that, there were a couple of investigations which led to a coroner's inquiry, and what came out of that was really an eye-opener for the whole industry. The coroner basically said that nobody took overall responsibility for the integrity of the roof, and that was all the way from the designers of the software that produced the trusses to the tile fixer nailing battens onto the roof. So that was a fairly important finding. As a result of that, the minister of the day decided to convene a trust task force, and that had a number of industry representatives on it to work through the issues, so that there was a clear pathway of responsibility and accountability for everybody's part in the process of building a truss roof, and making sure, of course, that it was always going to be practical and cost effective, that it was something that the industry would be able to deal with. So the Trust Task Force didn't get very far into its considerations, and it soon became obvious that it wasn't just the matters involved with the Riverside collapse. There seemed to be a general lack of appreciation in the industry for how a truss roof is framed up. And there were certainly instances that were presented to the task force where supporting members have been cut. In some instances, nail plates had fallen off of trusses. Now, these all led to roof failures, which fortunately didn't lead to fatalities like the Riverside collapse. But it was worrying that in fact these things had happened, and it indicated that there was a general need for the industry and for all the players in the industry to understand the importance of how our roof is framed up and their role when they're working on these sorts of roofs. Quite often changes are made to roofs. People decide to do an addition or just to change the roof in some way. That needs to be handled with great care. There are different ways of framing up a roof. If you don't understand how the roof has been framed, you may accidentally make an alteration to the roof which actually makes it unstable. Sometimes these things don't become evident for a while. It was 7 years before the Riverside roof collapsed from the time it was built. So there can be a long-term problem sitting there before it starts to become evident that, hey, something's wrong with this roof. Yes, the Minister's Task Force produced a whole suite of recommendations. Not all of those needed regulation change. Some of them the industry's taken on itself. But the last, if you like, piece in the puzzle is the new regulations that have been gazetted and come into effect on the 1st of July. We've actually given the industry about 9 months from the time that they were first gazetted to implementation, to give industry time to get prepared, because we knew that the industry will need training, there'll be people needing training to become familiar with the new requirements. Essentially, the regulations do two things. First of all, they make sure that the building works supervisor takes some responsibility for checking that the roof has in fact been framed up correctly. And to help them with that, there's a trust checklist that they need to fill out and forward to the council, and they're also receiving training on how to do that. The other part of the puzzle is to make sure that the council then has an opportunity to inspect the roof before it's sealed up. Because of course once you put the iron or the roof tiles on and you're sealing in, it becomes very difficult to fully inspect a roof to see that it's framed up properly. So there's provision in the new regulations to make sure that it's left open for a reasonable amount of time for council to undertake an inspection if it needs to. It needn't in all instances, but in some instances the council will decide to do an inspection to make sure that the checklist has been properly filled in. Provided they go through the same approval process, so assuming they've got their building approval as they should do, then it'll be very much the same process. They'll get the design, they'll get the truss design approved as part of that. They'll then go ahead and build it, and the same provisions will fall into place. There'll need to be a checklist produced by the building work supervisor, and again the council will be able to inspect it. The danger with not so much add-ons, but where people make alterations to roofs, for instance installing air conditioners or adding a hot water heater onto a roof. This is where people can come unstuck, because it's not necessarily work that needs a council approval, and yet you're actually putting extra loads onto a roof. So that's where the contractors who are likely to be working in a roof space, such as your air conditioning contractors and plumbers, need to be aware of the importance of the roof framing, so that if they suspect a roof is not adequate to support the loads that they're putting on, then they can raise the alarm and they can let the building owner know that there's a problem and it needs to be addressed. So that work is something that's outside of the approval system, and it's something that the building owner and the contractor both need to be aware of. Part of that is the purpose of this DVD, and the booklet that the Consumer and Business Affairs are publishing is to get to these contractors, these subsidiary contractors if you like, so that they become aware of the importance of roof framing. There's also been training for people who put solar panels on roofs. There's been quite a successful training program there to make sure that they at least are able to, at a cursory look, because they're not trained engineers, but be able to say, there's some warning signs here with this roof. Maybe I shouldn't be putting this panel on, this photovoltaic array, until it's been checked out by an engineer. So there's been a process of trying to inform any contractor who is likely to work on a roof of the things to look out for, so that they can at least raise the alarm with the building owner, and importantly for themselves, to safeguard themselves, because they likewise really shouldn't be working on a roof that potentially could collapse under them. So there's been a steady process of trying to get the message out, if you like, that roofs have to be treated with a great deal of care.